Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to all of our witnesses today. And in particular, I'd like to welcome you, Mr. Lombardi. As we know, I came to know you in your work at Hanscom Air Force Base, and it's great to see you here in this new capacity. I appreciated very much the work we were able to do then, and I know, coming from the Massachusetts environment, you do recognize the opportunities presented by working with the academic communities as well as the private sector and the federally funded research facilities, and the opportunities that creates, given the rapid change environment we live in. But I wanted to revisit some of your testimony in which you talked about the Air Force's efforts to contract with companies that have not traditionally worked with the services. I know this was a pilot project that actually took place at Hanscom, and I'm just curious as to what your experience was with this type of outreach, what has been, and what are some of the best practices and lessons learned that came as a result. And given the universe of companies that are out there, I'm also curious as to how you identified and solicited those companies to become part of this effort.
Yes, ma'am. Well, as I mentioned, and you're correct that this was all done as part of the team up at Hanscom, the PEO up there, Steve Wirt, as you're well aware. The DCGS program, what really helped us in being able to reach out to non-traditional companies was actually the fact that we had gone in and opened up the architecture with respect to the DCGS system. And by virtue of doing that, that opens up the capabilities of really going out to the non-traditional players, because oftentimes the non-traditional players are the ones who are going to provide you near-term, really relevant applications or smaller components and everything. And so in the case of the DCGS, what was really interesting on this is that we were able to take a process that was actually, our DCGS is actually a system that takes in the intelligence and disseminates it out. And it's disseminated out to not only our U.S. forces, but also coalition forces. And so the security levels are different. And so what was happening is this was a manual thing that was done over a half hour to an hour to be able to essentially take out elements of the reports to make sure it met each of the different players, different partners. And so by virtue of doing this application, we were able to get that work done in the matter of 30 seconds.
But how did you identify the people that you brought into this effort? How did you reach out to them?
By virtue of going out and doing this as other transaction authority, we were able to reach out to and build a consortium. And of that, the consortiums were all playing together. And the consortium was built with traditional and non-traditional players. And by virtue of that, then they started teaming together, knowing where the real capability of each were, and came together into, as I said, there was originally 19 different companies, but they then went into about 13 teams, and ultimately we got us down to awarding of 2. So it was really the use of the other transaction authority that allowed us to reach out to consortiums that were building upon themselves in this manner.
And this was an experiment, so you weren't really wrestling with the company's concerns that Mr. Stackley referenced about the non-traditional defense companies who don't know how to wrestle with the data rights issues or are concerned about them, or the oversight issues. It was really more an experiment that sort of put those things aside?
It was an experiment from that standpoint, but I think there's an opportunity here, and particularly as we look at more and more of our systems having this open architecture approach, where we will be able to reach out and get to people who are really more of the non-traditional players, and because in that case we're going to actually own the standards, we're going to own the interfaces, we're going to own how everything is integrated in together. And so by virtue of doing that, we can reach out to a better population of players to be able to support us.
And you're taking this into account as you formalize this process and broaden it?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. I yield back.